Breathe in, look around, but look deeper. Because how you see, that's what becomes real. Perception. Not just what hits the senses, but what your mind makes of it. A lens, a filter, a frame. It's not what happens to you, it's the meaning you assign. When life nudged me to pivot, I could have seen failure. Fear, loss, but I saw a door. A blessing, a beginning. That shift in vision, it became Santiago. It became me. Same moment, different mind, perception reshaped my path, and reality followed. We don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are. Storm inside, storm outside. Peace within, possibility everywhere. Mandela saw peace where others saw revenge. He chose empathy in prison cell and reshaped a nation. His perception created a new reality. But Salem, they saw fear, witchcraft and shadows. Perception ran wild and the truth was buried. Hysteria became law, reality bent by fear. Here's the truth. Your perception of the world reflects your internal world. If you don't love yourself, the world reflects that lack. If you are whole, the world responds in kind. As within, so without. Events are just events. You assign the value. Positive, negative, good, bad. That's you. So what do? Audit the voices around you, the content, the crowd, and most of all, the conversation within. Speak to yourself with love, with kindness. Align your spirit, mind, and body, because when you do, perception shifts, and so does your life. We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. So I'll ask you, how are you? So 10 years ago, to this very day, I was privileged enough to have a decision made for me that it was time to go on and start my own company. Another way of reframing that is I was basically fired. So imagine going into work, getting a cup of coffee, sitting down at the computer to kind of look at some things you've been working on, and you see your name on the side of a dashboard, the compliance dashboard. So I do what anybody would do. I click on my name to see what it is, and I find my resignation letter that I did not type. A little bit later on, the woman who owns the firm comes down and asks me if I can meet after lunch. And I say, sure, knowing why. But on the other side of lunch break, the reason I'm leaving for lunch is I'm going to Roman's pre-kindergarten graduation. So I'm going to go watch Roman graduate from pre-kindergarten, sit next to Ange and Leo, knowing that when I come back to work, this resignation letter of mine is going to be given to me. There was no fear. I sat there cool as a cucumber. Ange, did you know that anything was about to happen? I didn't mention it to Ange. I was present in the moment, watching Roman, enjoying that, knowing that when I go back, the conversation I'm about to have. And I chose to view that as a positive, as an opportunity. I was already planning on one day going out on my own. Before I joined this firm, I actually had the game plan to do that. So this decision that was made for me, I could have chosen to perceive it as a bad thing, and who knows where that would have taken me. I could have scrambled, taken a job that I hated, and gone down another path where I'm miserable, but I chose to see it as a positive. Silas is jamming out there, listening to Travis Scott. So I saw it as a positive that this thing that I wanted to do years before, here's my opportunity, and I didn't have to make this hard decision. And fast forward 10 years to the day, here I am today, giving a talk, doing what I love to do, getting ready to announce tomorrow that my firm has been rebranded from Aurelos Wealth to Santiago to represent the next phase of my career. Again, if my perception was different, it could have been a whole different story. I wouldn't know Devin, I wouldn't know Morgan, Roman wouldn't be training with Zach, a totally different life. And what allowed me to create where I am today was maintaining a positive perception. And we have control over our perception. So I want to define perception. I want to make sure I get it right. So when I looked up the perception, the definition that I found was the ability to see, hear, or become aware of something through the senses. A mental impression. And I want to focus on the mental impression because that's essential to understand. And as I've written about and discussed before, hat tip to Bob Proctor, rest in peace, but our thoughts are things. If we can believe something, we can achieve it. So our mental is what helps us create this reality, and if our perception is influenced by our mental, or our mental is influenced by our perception, however it flows, it is a big part of our reality. And if we're going to be serious about pursuing our authentic life, finding out who we really are, and living the life that we were created to live, we need to maintain control of our perception. And really, I could probably end the talk now. Between the poem and that little tidbit right there is all you really need to know. But I want to go deeper into some things to help you kind of think more about where your perception is today, and is it helping you, is it slowing you down, and how can we go about correcting that, fixing it, and making it an asset of ours rather than potentially a liability. So it's important to understand that perception is subjective. Your reality created by your perception is not my reality, and mine is not yours. Your perception creates your objective reality, which is why I can sit here today with all of the headlines that are out there today that might make some people feel like this is a scary time, a dangerous time to be alive. And while it's not perfect, my subjective reality tells me that this is one of the best times to be alive. That net, the world is a good place despite all of the problems that may be there. That may not be your reality. That may not be what you see, because we're coming at it from a different perspective. But I challenge you to think about, if you're serious about trying to take control of your life and live the life that you want to live and find greater happiness and find fulfillment and purpose, which perspective is going to be more beneficial to your journey? Is it a, we'll say, positive perspective or negative? And positive and negative are, to be determined and defined later on, but, good or bad, positive, negative. Which perspective is going to help you live a life of fulfillment? I vote on the side of positive and optimism. So, if your perception creates your reality, then it is important for us to have the awareness of that so that we can use that to our ability. So, what is your perception doing? What's the impact it has on your life? I want to focus on how perception is holding people back sometimes, because perception can be very restrictive. It can keep you from being your authentic self. Who am I to host a series of talks? Who am I to start a podcast? I'm not important. That type of talk keeps you from growing into something that maybe you're supposed to be. It can keep you from making an impact on others. Again, imposter syndrome is a thing that a lot of people talk about today. That is a perspective of yourself that you are not as great as you are. And it keeps you small and keeps you from having impact on other people. Keeps you fearful, stressed, and anxious. There are a lot of anxious people in the world today. Some rightfully so, and some self-induced. Keeps you unhappy. It can lead you to harming people, as we'll hear in an extreme situation in a little bit. And ultimately, the restrictiveness of your perception can rob you of the ability to live a fulfilled life. There are too many people whose perspective on life is making them unhappy. It's preventing them from seeing the good in the world. It's preventing them to see the abundance that surrounds them. And it's preventing them from loving themselves. And it doesn't have to be this way because, again, we have control over it. I've talked about in the past our mindset and how we have control over that. Again, perception is in that same realm. So if you want to find things to complain about, you can easily find things to complain about. But if you want to find things to be thankful for, you can also find things to be thankful for. If you want to find things that are positive in the world, you can find them. So it's the old saying, actually I'm going to throw that saying out. I forgot it. This is the hammer and a nail saying, but I can't remember exactly how it goes. But you know what I'm saying. Give a man a hammer, everything's going to look like a nail. If you want to find positive things, you can. If you want to find negative things, you can find that as well. What are you choosing, and how are you shaping that? And there's a saying that Henry Ford said that I like, if you think you can, or if you think you can't, you're right. And while that's it's not explicitly talking about perception and perspective, maybe it's a little bit more of self-belief. It's the same thing. If you want to see the world as a bad place, you're right. If you want to see the world as a good place, you're right. You still have that same choice. And speaking of choice, in the poem you heard me mention Nelson Mandela. This will be a history lesson for Roman and Silas, even though Silas is not listening. Oh, he is listening. He looked up. So Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison in South Africa under the apartheid regime. He was looked at as a threat, as a terrorist, as somebody trying to overthrow the government, when really he was trying to bring equality and bring freedom to South Africa. So as he spent his time in prison, 27 years, wrongfully imprisoned, he chose to come from a perspective of opportunity. He chose to maintain a perspective of peace over conflict. He brought in the prison guards to have conversations and saw them as people, even though they were his oppressors, and saw them as human beings and welcomed them into the conversation. And eventually, he was freed and brought the first democratic election to South Africa and won and became president. He chose to have reconciliation over revenge. It would have been very easy to come out of prison, if he got out, and start a civil war. Come back to get revenge. But he didn't. He chose peace. And ultimately changed South Africa's history, avoided more murders, and ended up winning a Nobel Peace Prize, and ultimately being a leader and a source of motivation for the world. So I early on just talked about perception and how it shapes your world. But one man's perception of a situation that was pretty dire, which would have been really easy to throw your hands up and give up and feel sorry for yourself and be negative and be pessimistic, he chose the other side of that coin and changed the world. One person's perception can change the world. So what influences your perceptions? The people you surround yourself with. I would like to think that evenings like this is a positive influence on your perception. The content you consume. Those of you listening or watching this conversation, I hope this content is a positive influence on your perception. The social media accounts that you scroll, politics, family, schooling. There's no shortage of external influences on your perception. And in addition to these external influences, we have life experiences as well. What happens to us throughout life can also shape our perception, whether it's directly to us or witnessed. One I often see in my work as a financial advisor is the stories we have, our perception of what money is or money isn't. A lot of people view money from a scarcity mindset because what they saw growing up told them that money was scarce, that we have to hoard everything, that we don't have enough, that the rich have all the money and we don't have the opportunity. All these stories that shape people's perception on money, which keeps them boxed in and limited. So a lot of outside influences and a lot of life experience can influence our perception. And to show you how outside influences can make perception run, back in the 1600s, 1690s in Salem, this is the Salem witch story, there were young girls who started to have some odd behavior, some fits, some convulsions. And being back in the 1690s, they didn't have the internet to Google what might be going on. And in their limited knowledge of science and limited knowledge of the world, people began to equate these behaviors to witchcraft. And if you're not familiar with the story, everybody believed that anybody who was having these types of events and acting this way were witches. And they ended up, as a community, killing 20 people, arresting more, damaging families, all because they believed this perception was that witchcraft was running through their community. Coincidences that we see every day now became signs of witchcraft. Dreams that people had were able to be used in the courts to show witchcraft. Everybody in this community began to believe this thought, so their reality came to be that these young women were witches. And obviously later on, people realized that that wasn't true. The courts reversed and said all those things weren't true, but it was too late. The damage was done. It's an extreme situation, but it illustrates how quickly reality can change to be a reality that seems absurd when we look back at it, but in the moment, it's very real. And we see some of that today in the political landscape and other things going on. So perception can either be used to good, like Nelson Mandela, or perception can be used to the negative side and be swayed towards things where harm is actually done. And I mentioned these outside influences, social media, the people you're around. Those are influences on your perception and on your life, but they're not the greatest influence on your perception. It's easy to look outside at external forces to place blame. But the truth is, and this is going to be maybe a little hard, I hope that there's one thing you take away from tonight's talk. I hope you take away that your perception of the external world is a reflection of your internal world. And I'll say that one more time. Your perception of the external world is a reflection of your internal world. And I think most people think it's the other way. It's the external world that is shaping our internal world, and that's the easy way out, because we can place blame on other situations. We don't have to own up to the fact that the reality of it is the reason we see the world in a certain lens, and obviously one that's not as positive if it's the way we want to change it, is because we're not happy inside. So if we're not loving ourselves, how can you love others? How can you love the world? You have a jaded lens when you are not connected to your true self and you're not happy. So if you're struggling internally, you're going to see struggle externally. But if you are aligned internally, you'll see the world through a different perspective. And again, it may not be easy. I never promised that the pursuit of your authentic life was going to be an easy process. Depending on how much trauma you have internally, how much struggle is going on in there, you might have to go through some rough patches. You might have to seek professional help. But the positive in that is you can work yourself through it. You don't have to stay in that world if you don't want to. There's a famous saying that's in the Emerald Tablets, which is an ancient text. It says, as within, so without. As within, so without. As your inside world is, your outside world will be. It's why you see the people who are eternally optimistic seem to navigate life with a little bit more ease. Things fall into place for them. It looks like they're very, very lucky. And on the other side, the people who are negative and tilt towards being the Debbie Downers of the world, it just seems like nothing ever goes their way. They're always having something to complain about. Something bad is always happening to them. And it could be the law of attraction, or it could just be that their perception shapes that world that way, and that's all they see. And therefore, that's all that they experience. And I mentioned positive and negative a couple times right here. It's important to realize and understand that nothing has any value till we assign it. Meaning, an event is just an event until we say it is a positive or a negative. An event is just an event until we say it's good or bad. And our perception shapes whether it's good or bad, whether it's positive or negative. If I go back to my journey, getting let go could have been a positive, which is what I chose. It could have been a negative. You put somebody else in my shoes, they may have gone down the negative. It was just an event. It had no value to it until I saw it as a positive. And I'm so thankful that I'm wired this way, that that's just how I am. It's one of the reasons I sometimes believe that maybe we do have multiple lives, and that I've learned some of this before, so I'm just naturally that way. Obviously, my mom and dad have some influence on it, but the way it's hardwired in me, I feel like it's more than just what I was taught. But if events are just events and news are just news, you determine whether they're negative or positive, good or bad, and your internal state is going to be the one that directs which side you choose. And so I was thinking about, how does our perception get formed? And I was walking with Ange the other night, and I was explaining to her, I said, I think there's two flows. There's an event, and there's a reaction, and then there's emotion, and there's perception, and then there's reality. That's one way. Or it could be there's an event, there's a reaction, perception comes in, then emotion comes, then becomes our reality. And I'm sure there's science that tells us which one is the right one. Maybe there's both possibilities. But for tonight's purpose, I didn't do any scientific research, because I don't think it matters. What I think what matters is having an awareness of where our perception, where our emotions are flowing. Regardless of which one comes first, using those as triggers to say, hey, this thing happened, or I'm reading this headline, or I'm watching this show, and I'm feeling this way. And if it's not the way that's leading you in the direction of where you want to be going, once you recognize it, you can begin to make changes to it. You can think differently. You can back it up and why do you feel that way? Begin to understand it and begin to shift your perspective, shift your emotions towards the direction that you want to go. But without that awareness, it doesn't matter. So one day I'll figure out what the real flow is, how our brains work, and all of that. But for tonight's purpose, the focus is the awareness. Understanding how you're feeling, where your perception's going, and then doing what you need to do to change it if you need to. And the more you do this, the more you exercise that awareness, the easier it becomes to stop yourself sooner. You get practice. You recognize when you feel a certain way a lot faster. And you know what you need to do to get yourself back to where you want to be. And eventually this compounds. And it changes your natural state of perception. Meaning if you are somebody who sees the glass as half empty, the more you practice this, you begin to become somebody who sees the glass as half full. So now your natural state of perception is positive and optimistic, which allows you to navigate your way, I think, a little bit smoother. And in all of this, it doesn't mean that, in controlling your perception, it doesn't mean you suppress feelings. You can be a half-full person and still be sad and frustrated and anxious. You can have those emotions. You should have those emotions. But you shouldn't let those emotions direct where you're going. It's recognize them, break it down, process it, and then get back to your normal state or get back to the state that you want to make your normal state. So what can we do about all this? Well, first off, I'm going to restart my camera so it doesn't stop on me. Okay, so what can we do? I want to start with the most important side of things first. What can we do internally? If that's the most powerful impact on our perception, what can we do internally? The first thing I think you can do is just look at the way you talk to yourself. What is your self-talk? If your self-talk is negative, then chances are your natural state of perception tends to be more that way. Low energy, negative frequency. If your self-talk is more positive, then it probably means you're going to be receiving things in a more positive light. And when you catch yourself telling yourself you're not good enough, or whatever that negative talk might be, you recognize it and you correct it. And you begin to shift that internal state. And I think one of the easiest and most powerful ways to do this, should not be a shock for any of you, is to align your spirit, mind, and body. It's something I think I've talked about in every single talk, and I'll never stop talking about it. Do it however you want to do it, but when you align your spirit, mind, and body, you bring a harmony internally, you get closer to your authentic self, you begin to live your authentic life, and then your natural state is just happiness. Because you are the person you were created to be. You're living the life you were created to live. And a lot of our internal unrest comes from the frustration of not being who we're supposed to be. So if we can be that version of ourselves and have that harmony, then you're going to have a better state of perception internally. So selfishly to ourselves, there's only a couple things I really think you need to do. The main one, and I don't live in a world of absolutes, but the closest I will get to an absolute is aligning your spirit, mind, and body. Getting connected to your true self will help bring you to that center state. If you look at the external influences, that's a little bit easier. Audit. What are you watching? What are you listening to? What is the slant of the language of the content that you're consuming? Even if it's not even the news, even if it is movies and TV shows, what is the energy coming from those? Because those will impact your internal state. And is there a reason you're drawn to negative types of shows? Maybe, maybe not. So evaluate that, the news, the podcasts, the videos, the social media. Pay attention to that. Take a look at the people you surround yourself with. What are they talking about? What energy are they operating from? Are they positive or are they negative? Not all teachers, but I spent a lot of time working with teachers and in the teacher's lounge. And the mood of educators, within reason, was extremely pessimistic. I never would have imagined that from the outside looking in. And it was like once one teacher started going, they all piled in. And I just sat to myself thinking, like, when a teacher runs, I'm listening, like, man, if I was a teacher, I would be avoiding these people. Because that's not going to make me love this job that I thought I loved. Their perception was one thing, and there might be some truths in it. They might be underpaid or underappreciated or overworked or have too many exams they have to give. There's tons of things that could be problematic for them, but there also was a lot of good. They're changing kids' lives. They're doing what they said what they love to do. You could find the positive in it. So who are you around? And if they're not aligned with where you want to go, if they're not lifting you up, then maybe you need to change that. And again, your pursuit of your authentic life is not always going to be easy. That could mean changing friends you've been friends with forever. It could be changing who you surround yourself with at work. It could be evolving family members. It's not easy, but if you're serious about it, Betty the Butcher says not everybody gets to go. Some people have to stay behind. Not easy, but necessary. The saying, birds of a feather flock together. Well, you may need to find a new flock or change your feather if that's possible. So a few things I want you to ponder as we kind of wrap up tonight and hop into the conversation. Like I said early on, I could have cut this talk to 5 minutes. My poem and the little bit about your mind is really all you needed to know. But a few things to think about as you leave tonight. What is your default perception? And does it vary depending on where you are? Is your perception at work one way versus in your life? Are you on the positive, optimistic side when you're with your family? Are you negative at work? Or vice versa? What is your default perception? Are your influences around you, the people, the social media, the content, are they helping or hindering your default perception? And what's one thing, just one thing you could do to improve your perception, to improve how you talk to yourself, to improve your internal state? What's one thing you could do? And don't share that tonight. Tonight's not a night of exercises. And I want to leave you with a quote that you heard in the poem, but I want to highlight one more time. And the woman who said it, her name is Anaïs Nin. We don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. And so my question to you is, how are you? Look up. So, perception and your reality. What thoughts, ideas, feelings, emotions came up as we kind of worked through that?
I'll
Yes.
just throw in something that you were saying about, like the teacher's lounge. I definitely see that in a lot of work environments, and it's like misery loves company. So one person starts complaining, and then everyone just kind of piles on because it's like, well, I'll add to that, I'll add to that. So I know this is something, and again, it's with your influence, but at work I do try, because I'm with women all the time, to be like, hey guys, this is negative energy. Like, let's cut this out. We're not going to keep this up. So just trying to make it lighthearted, but it also helps them to be aware that, like, hey, like, this is a fun place to work. Like, we don't need to be talking bad about things. So, I don't know, just kind of creating that awareness and trying to make other people aware of it too, that you want to be a part of your flock and that you enjoy, that sometimes if you start to see them going down that negative road, again, with your influence, I try to.
And the thing is, I think going back, and this is not to pick on teachers, but this experience, those teachers didn't start out feeling that way. And there probably are events and things, and my sister's a teacher, like, there are things that happen to teachers, and education has changed over the years that could change your perspective. But I'm willing to bet it was one person that started the domino. And that one person actually may have been internally upset for other reasons. They may have been unhappy for other reasons, and they brought that to the workplace, and then it just spread, like you said. And that teacher or that individual who started it at the workplace could be long gone. The impact of their perspective could be continuing on for generations of teachers without anybody knowing it. And sometimes in the workplace, those things happen because people are living a life that's not what they want. So they're not happy in the work environment, and they don't know that, and they carry that negativity and that frustration of living an inauthentic life to the workplace. And again, then it spreads.
I would say too, like, well, I can be better about it, but I try to be, or I feel like it's a thing with like speaking things into existence.
Mhm.
So I feel like if you say negative stuff constantly, like it's just gonna bring negativity to you.
And it rains and pours.
Right.
I believe it. I'm like, it's the law of attraction.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds super woo, but like, I honestly believe it. And I almost wonder if the law of attraction works more on like the negative frequencies.
They do say, like in a podcast I listen to, they talk about how a negative thought is like 300 times more powerful than a positive one. So when you have that negative thought, it is more powerful and can drag you down more than.
I believe it. Because we can all think positive things, and like the positivity may take longer to come, or maybe sometimes the positive thoughts that we're having are actually showing up in different ways, so we're missing them. And then the negative, because negative can show up in many different ways, and we feel the pain of negativity. Like with money, we feel the pain of loss more than we feel the pain of gains. So it's easier to pick up on the negative, and it's easy to miss on the positive. That's why the awareness, I think, is so important. As soon as I notice my mind going negative and being frustrated, like, stop, pause. If you don't stop thinking this way, more is going to come. So what is something that I can find to be thankful for? What is a positive that's going on? Let me redirect to the good and put that to the side, because I don't want more of it.
Yeah.
And I honestly have that conversation in my head. Like, stop
And
it,
the
dude.
speaking things too, like what's the one thing that Dad always tells you guys you're not allowed to say? Can't.
Yeah.
Like since our kids were little, he'd always, when they say I can't, no, you don't say that you can't. Like don't speak that negativity into existence.
I didn't even know Henry Ford's quote at that point. But I was already living it. Again,
But you remember that video of him?
Yeah.
He's like, don't say can't. Like he's little,
Yeah.
and you're like, hey, wait a second. He was playing basketball when he said that.
me?
No, it
No.
was Roman.
You did not say that.
but I think this concept of our perception is really important, because pursuing your authentic life is a high energy process. And if you're not operating at a higher level of energy, the law of attraction, you're not going to get there. Whether it be you keep yourself in situations that don't allow you to get there, you don't believe that you can do it, or you don't even allow yourself to envision what you want because of your perception of the way things are. And I'm fortunate to be someone who receives things at a high level of frequency, and it's just my natural state. I know it's not easy, especially if that's not your natural state. But I know it is possible to make that shift. And my hope is that you don't wait until it's a super painful, traumatic event to make that change. Like, don't wait for the biggest struggle of your life to come to try to change your perspective. Work on it beforehand, and maybe you can avoid that. Or maybe you have to go through it, but still, it'll make it easier to go through it.